Because fortunately, the feedback signal is very low impedance. It won't, I don't think the Zob will hurt it at all, now that I'm thinking about it. But I'd do the experiment to make sure. Yes, sir?
So are the drivers driven evenly up and down the length, or are they got some kind of appetization?
Yes, no, they're not driven evenly. And that's because I wanted to move that image up. Remember, a line source left to its own devices will place the image at ear level.
Mm-hmm.
And that's too low for a singer or for an orchestra or for any realism from in the way I listen. So the drivers are driven in different ways to pull that image up. Yes, sir?
By doing that, though, don't you disturb the mirror image that you talked about
Get
in the
some
very
comb
beginning?
filtering
Like
when you
the
do
whole
that?
line source aspect of it basically is now centered in the middle, instead of going all the way to the infinity plus minus.
You know what? I worried about that. That's a good question. The question was, does that hurt the sound somehow to do that? To take the sound and bring it up? And I really worried about that a lot. So what I did was I did experiments. I listened and listened and listened and listened and listened some more and tried it both ways. And it did change the way the sound came out of the speakers, no doubt about it. But I couldn't hear it do anything bad. It really didn't. All it did was good. It raised the image. It didn't change the tonal balance at all. And it didn't change the line sourciness at all. And don't ask me how. It works that way. I can always think of a theoretical explanation after I know the answer.
Well, it makes sense, because you're changing the natural attenuation from where your ear level is to a different position, but you still project the same way.
Yeah. It does. It changes the projection. And it's amazing how good our ear brain is at taking slight differences and making sense out of them, or even nonsensical things that it hears, and working so hard to make sense out of it, to make a believable image out there in the world. It's really remarkable. Yes, sir?
What are the controls you have on the box in front of it?
One is for the female vocalist. The center one is the upper mid-range set of frequencies. It moves them up and down in level.
Okay.
The one on the left changes the bass response. Not the woofer, but these guys here.
Okay.
And the one at the very top on the far right changes the high frequency response.
Okay.
And
So you can't control the imaging height. That's built into the
That's built in.
internals of the.
That's right. Believe me, at one point I thought, I'll put another control on it. Put all the image height. But there's so many controls anyway.
Yeah.
Even when Jordan and I set a system up, half the time, I swear this is true, half the time it doesn't work right. We have to go, oh, what's the matter? And we go in and turn things, and maybe not half the time. How often do you think, Jordan?
Well, it's gotten a lot less lately.
Yeah. We've gotten some experience with speakers and amplifiers and stuff. Yes, sir.
The wire that's feeding the subwoofer is coming from where?
From this
Subwoofer amplifier in the rack.
Oh, you got a different amp.
Yeah.
Okay.
The subwoofer has an amplifier, separate,
Okay.
all by itself. This amplifier is a tracking down converter amplifier, very similar to, in fact, it's almost identical to the amplifier I've had in my subwoofers for the last 18, 19 years, my cube subwoofers. I would have put it in the speaker, but they wouldn't let me, they meaning the government, because that speaker is designed to go in a wall. And they won't let a speaker in the wall with its own amplifier. You have to have the amplifier outside because they think it might be dangerous.
So is the subwoofer integral to the system, or, in other words, do you have to have the subwoofer, or?
No, the question is, do you have to have the subwoofer? The answer is no. These guys will go down to about 80 hertz, 90 hertz all by themselves. And if you equalize them with a Bose equalizer, you can get a Bose 901 equalizer and use it. It'll crank the bass up and they'll have plenty of bass. Or, as an alternate, you can use any subwoofer. This one, though, is designed specifically for these speakers and is designed to blend in nicely. When I designed this speaker before I sold Sunfire, and so I designed this as a Sunfire product, and these were designed as a Carver product. But I was in the middle of making the transition, so I designed this. But before I did, I had that subwoofer and a pair of original quads, and I wanted that subwoofer, that one, to blend with those quads. Because I knew if I could do that, I hadn't yet designed these, finished the design on these guys, I knew I'd be able to get it to blend nicely with these. So that's where the sub comes from. And if you have one of these speakers, get the sub that goes with it.
Do you sell the sub separately?
The sub is sold as part of the system. It's $18,500 for the system, which includes the towers, their crossovers, and the subwoofer amplifier.
How much again?
$18,500.
But not the amps.
The amps are $9,500 up there.
Okay.
Was there, with the subwoofer, was there any issues having a not deep, long cabinet and standing waves, or does the design take advantage of that somehow, that kind of thing?
That's a great question. Basically, the question amounts to how did I get the subwoofer to work with the quads? Is that fair?
Oh, with the quad, no, well, no, I was thinking
Standing waves?
I'm sure there's some good information there since it was a design problem for you, but I was just wondering if the long skinny cabinet ended up having characteristics of its own that you had to deal with somehow. I mean, because people take advantage of that with different quarter wave designs, like mass load transmission line and stuff, which are usually maybe about a little less than twice that long for those kind of frequencies. So I was just wondering if there's something happening.
Yeah, but it was a problem. It was that exact thing. The fact that it was long and skinny was a problem. But I wanted it to go on the wall, so I didn't have a choice. However, so I thought, how am I going to get rid of this? And what happened is, when I listened to it, it sort of didn't sound right. It had a little muddiness to it, was the problem. So I thought and I thought and I thought, and I realized it was because it was vibrating too much. And I had one active and one passive driver. By doing that, you get a lot more bass. So I said, well, this isn't going to work. So I put two active drivers in and have them move back and forth like this. And it still sounded muddy. So the solution was and it turned out it was because the cabinet was shaking. If I put the cabinet in a big vise, mounted in two giant concrete blocks, it stopped making the noise. So I didn't do that. What I did do is I put another driver in here, and you can't see it because it's inside the cabinet. It's right in here, and it's a counterweight that moves back and forth out of phase with these guys.
So it's a coil with a magnet moving inside?
Yes. It's a little baby speaker with a 3-pound weight on it. And it moves back and forth in synchronism with these guys, but in opposite phase, so it stops this from shaking and making the bad sound. And it's the power to drive that speaker comes from the same amplifier that's driving the other.
So what drivers are you using in there that they're so narrow?
Well, they're drivers that I designed,
Okay.
and they're only this deep. And the way I did it was I used every single ounce of space that I had in there. The cabinet was the wood's too thick, so I made the back of the cabinet a piece of solid aluminum billet that is thin but solid, and I turned the magnet upside down, and I turned the voice coil inside out, sort of like taking your sweater and trying to put it on backwards, inside out, and so this woofer went from about this deep to about this deep, and still puts out a lot of bass. It goes down pretty low. It goes down to about 18 hertz. Once it's broken in, when it's not broken in, it makes it to 21. When you break it in, and it goes down. Yes, wait, you, sir.
Yeah, well, do you absorb the back wave from the side speakers inside the column or not?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you absorb the back wave from the drivers on the side of the columns inside the column, or do you let the column have a high pressure inside?
Well, they don't get out. They
Right.
stay inside.
Right.
And it is a high pressure system. If you push on them, like this.
No,
I
I was
can't-
actually talking about the speakers.
Oh, these guys?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
the sound is absorbed inside with sound absorbing material,
Oh, okay,
so it doesn't get out,
right.
at least hardly any,
And doesn't interfere with itself, as it were.
no.
Giving you
But
the-
I get the question, it's a very strong, it's a possibility,
Right.
and you have to know about sound absorbing and stuff.
Did you consider carbon fiber for the enclosure for the sub?
Yes,
And you chose not?
I rejected it.
Okay.
I build model airplanes, and I use a lot of carbon fiber, because carbon fiber is heavy, light, and it's rigid, but it's a pain in the tush to use it. So I thought about it for a little bit, and my friend and I, his name is Howard, I fly model airplanes with him, we started to make one, and we gave up right away. It was just too problematic. And it was unnecessary anyway to make it sound good. If that had been the only way to make it sound the way I wanted it, I would have done it anyway, but it was unnecessary. Yes,
Can you
sir.
talk about the history of your ribbons?
The history of these ribbons. Okay.
Are they your own design ribbons?
Yeah. About 20 years ago, when I was starting Sunfire, maybe a little more than 20, it was a long time ago, I wanted to make a little speaker which I called the Cinema Ribbon, a little baby one like this big. And Robert Harley reviewed it in the Absolute Sound a long time, about 5 years ago, I think, 5 or 6 years. No, it was 10 years ago, holy smokes. I'm old. But I went to a company in China called Hi-Vi, and I said, I'd like to have these ribbons made. And they said, that's great, but we need for you to pay for the engineering of it. And it was it was like over $100,000. And I said, holy smokes, that's a lot of money. So I talked to them, and we made a deal. They said that they would do the design. I'd drawn it all up and sent them the plans. They'll do that design if they can have an exclusive, or I suggested it. You can have an exclusive, or you can use it and sell them to anybody you wish. But I get an exclusive for 3 years. I think it was 3 years. So they did that, and I bought them, and I put them in my cinema ribbons, and then by and by, that 3 years timed out. It may have been only 2 years. Can't remember. And then they were free to sell it to anybody. So that's the history of it. And those guys were good. I had problems with my design of these things. They buzzed a little bit, especially when the suspension loosened up, and they would buzz right here and right here. And you could hear it on piano notes, and it drove me nuts. And I said, guys, these are the Chinese engineers, this is my problem. And they fixed it. They figured out how to do it. I was amazed. They sent me a sample, didn't buzz. And I beat it up. I really played it loud. I made that suspension look like popcorn, and it still didn't buzz. They were great. Those guys were good. Another thing about this ribbon, since I originally designed it for my little cinema ribbons, which were just one of them in the cinema ribbon, I knew that I needed a long voice coil. Like my amazing loudspeaker has a voice coil for the ribbon that goes up and down like that. It's a two-turn ribbon. So the electricity starts at the bottom, goes up, goes around, goes back down, comes up again, goes back down, goes to the amplifier terminals out. And it turns out that the force on a ribbon is given by an equation called IL cross B. It's a cross product between I being the current, L being the length of the ribbon, and B being the magnetic field strength. So, you can make a ribbon have more output by making a stronger magnet, or you can make it be longer, or you can put more current through it. Any one of those will do the job. But current is expensive. You have to have a big, huge amplifier. If you do it right, you need a 1 or 2 ohm ribbon. There aren't many amplifiers that can run 1 and 2 ohms, except some of the big Krells and the Mark Levinsons, but they're very expensive. So I thought, that's not a good idea. The other was to make a more intense magnetic field. And so I looked at the most powerful magnets known to mankind. And they would do the job, almost, but not quite, but they were too expensive. And Boeing started using them for their generators and stuff. because they had an intense magnetic field. So, what I did is I made the length long. Forgot about the strong magnets, forgot about high current, but I could make the length long by making it folded. And if you look at this, you can't see it from there, but if you look at it, each one of these goes like this. It goes up and down, and if you pull it apart, it's as high as I am, twice. Goes down, up, and back down. So L is much longer than just the height of the ribbon. And that gives it lots of output. Now, how does that help me with these guys? It was unnecessary to have that much output when I have a lot of them, because if you have one ribbon and you add another one, the output goes up 6 dB if you drive it with the same current. And so at least 3 if you keep the impedance the same. So 3 plus 3 plus 4 more, it's 3 plus 3. It's like 20 dB more output than is necessary. That would be crazy. So the solution was to not have it move back and forth very far. It hardly moves at all. Those ribbons go all the way down to 400 hertz, and they don't move very much. By doing so, they stay dead linear. They're the most linear transducer that I've ever seen. So that makes for a loudspeaker that has very low distortion. And Robert E. Green talked about that in his review. Good question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, placement sensitivity for the speakers. Do they need to be pulled out from the wall? Can they go fairly close? Some of us are in kind of tight living spaces.
Yeah. Well, all of you who have hi-fi systems have learned that they tend to sound better when you get the sound away from the walls. And that's because the short-term reflections go away. That's why they sound better when you move them. And you're allowed to listen into the interaural time delays that are associated with the music. So they should be far apart. However, because they're ribbons, if you can't move them away from the wall a few feet, put them right up against the wall, and they'll work. They really will work. And I didn't appreciate that until a guy named, a reviewer told me that, and actually he's an engineer, and he teaches at MIT, and he said, Bob, these speakers will work if you put them up against the wall. I said, are you kidding me? And I tried it, and I said, Dave, you're right. You're absolutely right. Dave Rich is his name. But, and there's a theoretical reason for that. I can't remember what it is. Because I always listen to him away from the wall, except I did the experiment, and he was right about that. Yes, sir.
Is there an ideal size room for speakers like these, for these speakers?
I don't believe so. I don't think so. When we finished building these, we took them around to about a dozen rooms, maybe not a dozen, but at least 8 different venues, small, medium, large, big rooms, small rooms, reverberant rooms, dead rooms, and to dealers as well. And they worked in every single room except one. That was a disaster. But we fixed it. So they can be in any room. That's the bottom line. Yes, sir.
Are these designed to have like a larger sweet spot or listening position, or is it like 4x4 and that's the best place to sit listening to these?
There's no designated sweet spot. They'll sound fine even if you're out of the sweet spot. Most of us listen to our speakers and we sit between them on a center line. So, listen, I'll tell you what, I've been talking for a while. I would like to take a break. Let's take a break and we'll come back and I can talk some more and we can have more questions. So let's take about a 10-minute break.
Okay, potty break.
Yep, potty break.
Breaks around the corner here in the door.
All right.